Yo people, hope you're all doing well and welcome to a new video. This video is just going to be a quick crafting update and I'm going to show you how you can level your crafters from level 90 to 100. I managed to get mine all done yesterday, and so if you're struggling to find what to do or which macros to use, then I'll just quickly go over some of the methods and the macros that I've used. Also, just want to say I hope everyone's having a good time in the expansion so far, and obviously as this guide is for Dawntrail, there may be some image spoilers, so feel free to just listen to the video if you don't want to see the new town or the new custom delivery area. So before you get started, let's quickly talk about some of the things that you're going to need. The first being buffs. You really want to make use of some crafting buffs, and the main buffs that I used were the revised engineering manual, which gives 75% XP boost for a set amount of time. So how it works is when you get 2 mil worth of boosted XP, then it drops off and you'll be able to reuse the manual. It is best to get quite a lot of these if you can, and then just reapply them when you notice that it drops off. You can purchase these using purple scripts from any of the collectible vendors. Another buff that will be good to use is the free company crafting buff, which gives an additional 10% XP, and you can also use any food buff for an extra 3%. I also had a bit of rested XP boost, which helped for the first few levels, but minus the rested XP, you can easily get around 90% XP boost, which honestly stacks up since you're going to be crafting a lot of items. Another thing to bear in mind is that I went into the expansion having full best in slot level 90 gear, and that also included having the relics for most of the classes too. I think I was missing my relic for level worker and goldsmith, which did make quite a bit of a difference when using some of the macros to craft the items. However, I will go into more detail and talk about that a bit later. So if you're coming into Dawntrail with your crafters at level 90 and you don't have the best in slot gear and you don't have a relic, then just bear in mind that the only thing that will really change will be how your macros are going to look. You can still use the process that I am going to mention, as these will be the most efficient ways to actually level your crafters. On the flip side, if you do have your best in slot level 90 gear ready, then you can level all the way up to 100 without having to change gear at all. So just keep this in mind. No need to be switching out your gear at level 94 or 97. So going into the expansion, I made sure to have 100 leave allowances stacked up, and I started off with leveling both my culinarian and my alchemist. Usually the best and most efficient method to use leaves at the start of a new expansion is to try and complete the leave quests that give the highest amount of XP. This is because you have a limited amount of leaves to use to try and level all your 8 classes. However, as I started leveling on the expansion launch day, prices were ridiculous for some of the materials. It did help that I had a friend that was story skipping and also gathering, and so I purchased materials directly from him. But yeah, it's not a viable option if you don't have a gathering friend who is already late in the expansion. If you already have your own gathering classes leveled, however, then that makes this process a lot easier. So for alchemist, I started off with the formula lambda until I got to level 93, and then I crafted a lot of the intelligent gem saps and probably got up to level 97 using these. The reason I did this is because the magnesia to make the whetstones were just way too expensive at the time and just made no sense. Once I got to level 97, I then started to level some of my other crafting jobs until the magnesias had dropped in price. And when they did, I finished off alchemy using these Levequests. I did the same for culinarian, so only using leaves to get to 100 and using the easier hand-ins at first. So firstly, I went with the mezcal up to level 93, and then I switched out to the royal maple syrups. I stuck with these until I reached around levels 96, and at 96 I switched out to the tacos. The tacos look hard to make when you first see the material list, but the only thing that's relatively pricey are the tomatoes, which are needed to make the chili sauce. I'll put a link in the description with a macro that I used specifically for the tacos using 1 high quality chili sauce. Bear in mind that you may need to hit 1 extra groundwork at the end of the macro depending on the type of gear that you have. Another thing to note with leave quests are I didn't create anything from the 98 or above category. I stuck with all leave quests only up to level 96, as they still gave a significant amount of XP and didn't require an insane amount of gil to make the materials. But if you look at some of the recipes required for the level 98 leaves and above, they are still really expensive. Once I'd finished leveling alchemy and culinarian, this is when I started to incorporate a bit of collectibles into my leveling. So this is another great method to use in general for leveling, and you could easily just use this method to skip leaves. The reason I wouldn't though is that Levequests give you more XP per hand-in, and the crafts are usually much cheaper to make. Collectibles should be used as more of a supplementary way of leveling if you are running out of leaves, or if you just don't have any in the first place. So if you go to any of the 3 main cities and head to the collectible vendor, you can already start making and handing in collectibles once you're level 90. The best is to spam the lowest level collectible until you start getting diminishing returns in regards to experience. For example, I used the 91 level collectible hand-in until I hit level 94, and then I switched to the level 93 recipe, used that until 97, and then used the 95 recipe up until 100. I mostly used one macro for all these 80 durability collectible crafts, which I will put in the macro list in the description. But yeah, this method is very simple. Just create the rarefied items listed, make them, hand them in. Easy. One thing to note here is that with the macros that I've listed, these mostly worked for me with my best in slot level 90 gear. There will be occasions where you might need to use a high quality material for one of the crafts to hit max collectability rating, or you might need to use a delicate synthesis or groundwork a few times after your macro has finished. On my crafters with relics, I had no issues with finishing the crafts with just a simple groundwork. However, on my level worker and goldsmiths that didn't have relic, I had to use delicate synthesis a few times to reach that max collectability rating. One thing that will also help here is to use food, something like the Jinga Biryani, just to boost your control and CP stats a bit in case you need to add some manual actions in after your macro finishes. But if anyone is struggling, feel free to pop me a question below in the comments. You can also hit me up in game if you are on light or chaos. Now, another method that I used for some of the crafters was the new Dawntrail crafting delivery system. For this method, you do need to get up to a certain point in the main scenario quest, which I think is at level 92 or 93, so it's not too far in. But these work identical to the Endwalker deliveries. You make a bunch of materials which are usually very cheap to make, hand them in and get a bunch of experience. This worked really well for my goldsmith and level worker, as the collectible and leaves at around level 94 to 95 were really expensive to make, and so I used this method instead to skip through those levels. If you haven't unlocked this yet, you can come to this area with any of your crafters, speak to this NPC, and then switch to any crafter of choice, and you will be able to speak to any of the delivery NPCs related to that class. Once you've accepted the delivery request, you will then just need to make specific items that are unique for these deliveries, which again, like I mentioned before, are really cheap to make and they just give you a bunch of XP. So yeah, it's a really good method to use if you're getting stuck on some of the Levequests and some of the collectibles at the current level you're at with your class. And lastly, I would highly suggest to make use of your Grand Company hand-ins. As I leveled all my jobs within a day, I only actually got to use this option once, but the amount of XP that you get from doing this honestly is really good. I got around half a level on every class using this. If you're taking your time with your crafters, make sure to head to your Grand Company and hand these in once per day, as it's a huge chunk of XP. And with that, that's about it. Those were all the main methods that I used. Nothing too difficult, just a lot of time needed and a lot of materials. Now, a tip I'd give you is if the materials on your server are really expensive, just hop over to other servers and see if the prices on your server are inflated. It's a really good method in not overpaying for items, as people usually think that the items they see on the market board are the actual prices, and that's not always the case. Also, as mentioned before in the video, if you have a friend that has progressed through a lot of the main scenario quest already and is a gatherer, might be a good time to reach out to them and work out a good deal, as you both will benefit from it. You will be able to get the items cheaper than the market board price, and your friend will be able to get instant sales and not have to worry about undercutting every 30 minutes. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please like and comment if you did. Please feel free to drop a comment below if you have any questions, and I hope you are all enjoying the expansion. I will see you in the next video. Peace.